Monday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great weekend. We begin with Browns former NFL quarterback E.J. Manuel on who he thinks the Browns starting quarterback should be.
I would start the season with a Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett, one of the two, because they're veterans. And I would then keep Shedeur Sanders, try to trade Dylan Gabriel, especially if he plays well in the preseason, to build up some of that draft capital, because there's going to be other teams that need a backup. Guys get hurt all the time. But I do believe Shedeur Sanders can be the future there. It's just a matter of why bring all these guys in? I mean, as far as bringing in the different roles, that's my question. And, you have veterans, you have young guys, and then you still have Deshaun, who you owe a bunch of money to as well, so you're not sure what they're going to do with him. But ultimately, I would try to move forward with Shedeur and try to develop him and let him be your future.
The reason you bring in all these guys is because you're not sure who's going to win the quarterback job, and you're trying to get acceptable quarterback play, which the Browns didn't have last year. New Orleans Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler, fifth-round pick a couple years ago, with a chance to win the Saints starting job this year. What advice he would give to the Browns, Shedeur Sanders, a fifth-round pick as well?
Yeah, I mean, he's a talented quarterback, as we all know. He's going to have his own path. Everybody has a different path. Everybody can't go first round, second round. Everybody has their own path. So take it step by step, take it day by day. I know he'll be great. I know he's, got a level head and knows what to do. Obviously runs in the family. So I know he's going to work hard and be a great player.
All right, Spencer Ratliff knows what it's like to be a fifth-round pick, so we'll see. Steve Weish from NFL Network, talking about Myles Garrett's career with the Browns so far.
The fact he has 102 sacks in 8 seasons, I don't think people understand how hard it is to get a sack, especially when you're like the guy on the defense. When people are double-teaming you, you saw some chips on the play right there while he was it blew right through him. Plus, he's 6'4", 275. Right? He's built like a sleek defensive tackle. By comparison, T.J. Watt is 6'4", 250. So this is a massive human being doing some of the things athletically that he does. But the way that Cleveland also, especially Jim Schwartz, who's come in last couple of years and moved him around, that's helped him. Because he's got 60 sacks the past 4 years. But here's the biggest part which shows his dominance, right? Like, he does not play on a team that gets 20-point leads and is forcing the other team to throw the ball 45 times a game. His team is usually trailing. He's had 2 winning seasons and played on an 0-16 team, right? So his team is usually trailing. Man. So his opportunities to get to the quarterback are probably far less than some other great pass rushers like a Dwight Freeney, someone like that, whose teams stake leads all the time. Like, when you talk about impactful greatness, this is a dude who is winning regardless of circumstance.
Yeah.
Well, they also have added a couple of defensive tackles with some speed and quickness to play next to him, Mason Graham, Malik Collins, as well as Michael Hall Jr. If he can come back, that should help him as well. All right, let's move on to the Guardians. Guardians trying to avoid snap a 9-game losing streak. Gavin Williams, Tariq Skubal, the starting pitchers, and both of them pitched really well. The game was scoreless in the 8th inning. In the bottom of the 8th, Stephen Kwan at the plate for the Guardians, and it's a single out into right field. That will score a run and give the Guardians a 1-0 lead. 9th inning, runner at third, Emmanuel Clase, and that one gets by Bo Naylor. Zach McKinstry scores from third to tie the game up at 1. In the 10th, Trey Sweeney, and that one ain't coming back to the home run porch and left a 3-run homer, and that made it 4-1. Still going as it's now Matt Verling with a double, and then Riley Green, a 2-run homer as well, as the Guardians fall 7-2 in 10 innings after they had held the Tigers to just 1 hit through 9 innings. Guardians now have lost 10 in a row. There's the 2-run homer by Riley Green. 10 in a row down for the Guardians.
We haven't been great at situational hitting. We have to continue to work on that. It's frustrating. This game felt like a kick in the pants. It really did. gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching. Like I said last night, the last few days we've played unbelievable baseball. We played an unbelievable baseball game today, and it just sucks when it's 3 miscues lead to a loss, and we have to be better. We have to be better. We got to take care of the little things. That's what makes this team so great, is we take care of the little things, and we haven't been.
You have to hit the ball to win. They have scored 15 runs in their 10-game losing streak. 6 of them came in 1 inning when they lost. That ain't going to get it done at any level. They need to start hitting the ball. The Cavs getting ready for Summer League, which will start later this week out in Las Vegas. Tyrese Proctor, second-round pick, who will be playing in the Summer League, knows he's going to be on the Cavs roster. They signed him to a multi-year contract. Proctor talked about his strengths and how he fits in with the Cavs.
Just space on the floor. I think I'm a really good shooter. I think I showed that last year at Duke, and just playing off the ball, playing different positions, and then just defensively, keep growing, keep learning defensively, and just trying, impact winning as much as I can.
How do you think that in your time at Duke, playing multiple different roles for your 3 years there, helps make the transition to the NBA maybe a little bit easier than had you just done one thing?
I think the biggest thing is just playing with really good players. My 3 years, had guys like Derek Lively, Kyle Filipowski, obviously most recent starting 5 getting drafted. So I think just being able to adapt and sort of pick your niche on the court and be really good at that, allowing the other players to be really good at what they do, and allow all of you to play together to get wins.
Proctor 6'6", showed he can shoot the 3, so we'll see how he fits in relative to the Cavs. Summer League gets underway Thursday out in Las Vegas. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jeff Lloyd from Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Up first, we're talking Browns. Stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day, put a little play in your day.
Browns are up first on Sports4CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, one thing, I don't know if it's true or not, but is Detroit captain Jamison Williams, they said he unfollowed the Lions on his media page, and he was headed to the Raiders. Now, that's who we need to compliment Jerry Jeudy in my book, and that make our wide receiver group full. That'll be it for today, Dave. Thank you. God bless you and the family. I love you, and be safe, and I hope you had a good 4th of July. Love you, bro.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd, host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Jeff, if Jamison Williams is out there, that would be the kind of receiver that would help.
Certainly, I don't think the Browns would, turn a negative ear to it. I think the reason that comes up is, you're probably getting to the point where the Lions and Jamison Williams camp are discussing, the future and, what potentially a contract extension would look like. I think it's, a little probably in the infancy stage of whether or not that would be a case. And, you look at Detroit and, they got some guys there just have overall speed, which make that offense what it is. Williams certainly one of them. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back, is another one. I'm not saying it's, something that's out there, but it's something, that would be monitored. But, I think at the end of the day, I think the Lions probably need every weapon they have.
Yeah, and again, those are the type of things that if it's out there, that's the type of deal Andrew Berry would likely make without question. We've seen that a number of times. All right, I know you addressed this on Browns 3D. Mason Graham, how much pressure do you think he's going to have on him as a rookie?
I think there's like a couple of levels to this now. I think right now everybody's kind of going through the honeymoon stage with Mason Graham, all the appreciation, and trying to understand, just what this young man is all about. And this is probably where it's certainly going to be unfair to Mason, of course. But he's the Browns' first round pick in 4 years. And, the Browns really need this draft class to hit. Just due to the fact that, they haven't had a first rounder in 3 years. They had one second rounder in 3 years. They really need these draft picks to hit. And that's hopefully going to be one of the biggest things that will, get this team, to where they want to be. And then, somehow, some way, either one of the two rookie quarterbacks becomes the guy, or, you search for that guy in April of 2026. But for Mason Graham, the pressure is definitely going to pick up because, I think the expectation, and again, I don't know if it's going to be fair, probably, but the Browns, because of the fact they have not had a first-round pick now, 3 seasons plus, you really need Mason Graham to be that guy. Also, the talk for 3 months was Abdul Carter and, of course, Travis Hunter, and then the Browns ultimately went the way they did. Yeah, it's going to pick up and probably pretty quickly for the Browns and Mason Graham in the hopes that he becomes an impact defender immediately.
Yeah, especially since you traded down from the second pick. Everybody will be watching to see what Travis Hunter does.
Travis Hunter catches 7 balls in the first 2 weeks. So I'll see what you did.
Right.
We know how it goes. We know.
Yep. Hey, let me ask you this, though. You have Graham. Now you've added Malik Collins and really to a certain extent Michael Hall Jr. if he's healthy. Is this the first time that, since Jim Schwartz has been back, that he has his kind of defensive tackles on this roster?
I actually, I actually just got done recording my own show, and this was, one of the things I'm emphasizing probably for this team as far as what you're going to look for to determine whether or not 2025 was a success for the Cleveland Browns. Look, we know what Miles is along that defensive line. But, you have other players as well. You can add Isaiah McGuire's name to that list. Does McGuire take the next step and, become a pass rusher on the level of what his run defense is? Mason Graham, again, I think we all think he's going to be pretty impactful in helping the Browns stop the run, something they were dreadful in 2024. Collins is more probably of a pure pass rusher. Juwan Briggs, certainly somebody that can assist in run defense. We saw by the time the Browns finally let him play last year that he could have some impact. You throw Mike Hall's name in there. Collins, certainly, a proven pass rusher who's on a 2-year deal. And I think one of the things you're going to determine about how successful this season was, maybe when you get away from wins and losses, will be what is the thought of the Cleveland Browns defensive line come January, as opposed to where it is here in August. And you have several players, like you're mentioning here, with Graham, with McGuire, certainly with Hall, and with Briggs, all of whom have the capability and the ability to improve. And, I think we could be having conversations shortly from now saying, you know what, this defensive line is a heck of a lot better and has some sustainable future to it with a lot of guys, at least under contract for 2026 and other guys that the Browns might be looking to possibly extend.
So when you look at the defense, I think we'd agree that the defensive line is intriguing. It could be really, really good. What are some areas that you look at and you're like, a little concerned about that?
As far as the defensive line?
Just the defense, defense in general.
I think the defense in general, look, they have some faith in Isaiah McGuire that he is going to take that next step as a pass rusher. I really thought they were going to do something impactful. And it wasn't a knock necessarily on McGuire. It was, and look, to have a good, guy who's on a rookie contract, have a good impact against the run, there's nothing wrong with that. There still would have been a role for McGuire. But I thought they were probably going to go a little bit stronger than maybe a 1-year, $4 million deal on Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. I would say, you certainly have questions and hopes that Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson collectively are going to return to their 2023 form as opposed to their 2024 form. Both guys on contract years. There could be a scenario, I believe even if they both play well, Cleveland would only entertain keeping one. I could see a scenario where Cleveland maybe doesn't re-sign either of them. But then you get to that safety position opposite Grant Delpit. And, for Hickman, third year, this is hey, am I going to be with Cleveland long-term or not? Similar to DeAnthony Bell last year, was a nice role player. Never really got to the point where it developed more than that. And the Browns didn't have much intention on bringing him back. And again, because it's the free safety position and, not necessarily, the last line of defense, but he's the guy that's, coming over with his eyes on the ball the whole time while the corner's struggling and hand fighting and, fighting for body position. It should be easier, for the free safety to come over and make a play. And it's just something, honestly, that the Browns have struggled with the entire time that they have had this regime intact. It was 2 free agency deals. Neither of them went well. They never really spent any, significant draft capital on it. That's something where, the Browns would really like to see, and it's probably not that hard because they haven't gotten much free safety play in the time they've been here. But if they could get something consistent out of the free safety position, I think that would really go a long way, and it would play really well into Jim Schwartz's philosophy of, we're going to play man on man. I'm going to rush the daylights out of the quarterback and either get the quarterback to the ground or hopefully force him into throwing some bad balls.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I would say the reason that they've struggled creating turnovers is because they haven't gotten good enough free safety play. That's a huge piece of creating turnovers.
You look at a team like, the Detroit Lions, Brian Branch. I mean, he is an absolute turnover machine, him along with Kirby Joseph. And you look at one of the reasons why, Detroit has been successful the last few years. Well, when your safeties combine for more than 10 interceptions per season, yeah, I mean, that's killing a lot of drives. And it's obviously giving your offense, ideal field position to at least turn those turnovers into points. It's definitely something that's been lacking for the Cleveland Browns, over the last few years.
Jeff Lloyd from the Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break, talk a little bit about the offense and the quarterback position. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Former NFL General Manager Mike Tannenbaum on the Browns quarterback situation.
For me, it's about competition. And look, I agree. Next year's draft is loaded with quarterbacks. I think you start Joe Flacco, great bridge quarterback. We know how difficult this Browns schedule is to start, but I think their future could be Shedeur Sanders. Dylan Gabriel is an unbelievable college player, 64 starts, over 18,000 yards, but the list of sub-6-foot quarterbacks that have won the Super Bowl is very short. We could talk to Drew Brees, very few exceptions to that. So to me, Shedeur Sanders should be given a chance at some point to try to be the future, and if he is, great. If not, as you guys alluded to, they got 2 first-rounders. If Jacksonville stumbles this year, it could be a very high first-round pick next year.
Jeff, and again, I keep hearing the national people talk about give the rookie quarterbacks a chance. They got to earn it. That's all I'm going to say. Nothing should be given to a quarterback simply because he's a rookie. You need to show that you're a professional and you're developing and you earn the chance.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that because, and again, if you take the name Shedeur Sanders out of the mix and you say, hey, the Browns drafted 2 quarterbacks, one in the 3rd round, one in the 5th round, I don't think your expectations would necessarily be extremely high that either one of these quarterbacks will end up, immediately good, so immediately good that maybe you would, entertain going another way with the 2 first-round picks in 2026. And I've been saying it from jump. Look, if you think the Browns can possibly contend in 2025, it's obvious. You start Joe Flacco. Joe's got the longer history, a lot of success. He's had success within this system, with this team. I think if you think Joe still has enough ability in his body at his age, which I think he does, that he gives you the best opportunity to win. Now, if it comes off quickly that that's not the case, then I think you at least want to get a good read on either of these young quarterbacks. And I think And it's kind of interesting because, everything they've done to this point, it seems like, Dylan Gabriel's kind of had like, I don't want to say the upper hand, but maybe the earlier opportunities. But maybe it's because, they're trying to handle Shedeur like he truly is a guy they drafted in the 5th round and slowly working him in. Because with young quarterbacks, you don't want tough days. You'd rather smaller sample size that maybe people deem successful as opposed to, it was another rough day or it was another rough day. Because, it's definitely a mental thing with the quarterback position. There's no question about that. And what is usually why young quarterbacks fail, it's usually because, the system and the team around him didn't have the appropriate plan in place, or, they put him in too early. There's, a number of factors. And, I think the Browns, I think they like both young quarterbacks. But, at the end of the day, to just say, hey, either one of these guys is going to be the guy when you respectively drafted him in the 3rd round and the 5th round, it probably doesn't hold the weight, to believing that one of these guys could be the guy.
So the Browns give us a glimpse of Shedeur Sanders taking the NFL reaction test.
Where's Trav at?
Oh. No. He's not on the leaderboard.
Okay, shit.
You can do whatever you want.
All right, bet.
Chat is saying stand up.
All right, bet. First one, I'm going to go standing up. I can't even see. Hold on, did you push it?
Yep.
Oh. I'm not close enough.
Okay, you got 2.
I'm looking straight at it. It's just my ability wasn't there. Bet. Let me lock in now. Oh.
Okay, you got 5.
All right, I feel like I'm getting distracted now. There we go, I got it. That was impressive, wasn't it?
Okay, 6.
That was impressive. That first one was lit.
So a little bit of interaction. You see why he's kind of a likable guy. Doesn't take it too seriously. But let me ask you this. What are some signs in camp that things are going well? What are the kind of things that you'll hear when a rookie is starting to do things to move himself up the depth chart? And I'm specifically with Sanders.
I think, honestly, it's going to be, Sanders connected on a beautiful 20-yard in route. But the thing is going to be, what's the name attached to that? Is it Jerry Jeudy? Is it, wide receiver 12 and 13 that everybody is scrambling to find the name at the end of the program? Because if it goes well, obviously maybe and this is one of the advantages you have in my belief that Joe Flacco ends up the week 1 starter is Joe doesn't need a boatload of work, nor are you going to overwork a 40-year-old quarterback at the end of July or in August. So if these guys are starting to progress, then ideally you could probably give them a little bit more time than you would other teams in regards of getting their starting quarterback ready. Certainly turnovers are something, you don't want to hear. Batted down balls are certainly something you don't want to hear from either of the rookie quarterbacks. Or, the old phrase of would-be sack because, they didn't get rid of it and, they just blew the play dead. But I think, Shedeur, and to his credit, I mean, there is zero evidence that Shedeur Sanders is not working every day. It's literally, it seems that this is all this young man does, essentially, is, work, and throws a football a ton. But I think, and then when you get, there's 2 rounds of joint practices, I believe it's Carolina and Philly. A lot of it is going to be, how we see it when it actually gets to preseason games. Because you want to see it string together. You want to see it in the form of drives. Not a glimpse here on a Tuesday practice or, a couple of nice red zone balls on a Thursday practice. You want to see it turn into, 8, 9, 10 play drives, that hopefully lead to points. But, and again, I think the Browns are taking the right approach. And I think that was something maybe people kind of got up in arms with a little bit, as far as, the mini camp, is that it didn't seem, like they were starting to progress Shedeur Sanders that much yet. But, with the joint practices, when he's doing it against other defenses, that begins basically the grading period. And then, of course, judging, of course, by success in preseason games as well.
So I'm curious as to your reaction to this. We know the Browns have 2 first-round picks, 2026. What do you have to see from either Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders or Kenny Pickett? I'll throw him in there. To make you not take that quarterback with a high first-round pick?
I honestly believe there's only 2. I only believe Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel could be the possibility there. And look, I said it at the time, and I'll continue to say it. There could be a chance that the Cleveland Browns just extremely appreciated everything about Dillon Gabriel's game, his work ethic, how he views the position, and maybe they just thought, hey, you know what? Dillon Gabriel one day might be, a 10, 11, 12-year backup quarterback in the NFL. A Case Keenum, if you will. I think, and it's difficult because, certainly, it's going to come down to overall playing time. If each one of them starts 4 games, I don't think you're any closer to having a belief that either one of them is going to, walk you away from using one of those selections. Honestly, it could be a case where if both of them played well, the Browns are saying, well, we've struggled with this, so I don't care if I have 3 good, young, promising quarterbacks on the roster, because it's certainly better than where we were this past January going, well, where do we go now? And, sometimes things, and we say it all the time in sports, oh, well, they're too deep or they don't have enough talent. These things have a way of working themselves out. But for now, and of course, a lot of it will have to do with, how the Browns' overall record is. Certainly the Jacksonville Jaguars' overall record. But, unless the Browns made the playoffs and Sanders or Gabriel, started close to 10 regular season games, got you to the playoffs, started a playoff game, I think we're not even anywhere near where we could start the conversation that the Browns would not entertain selecting a quarterback in 2026 in the first round.
Yeah, exactly where I was going. Even then, I think they'd still would. It would depend on who that guy they're looking at is, without question. Jeff Lloyd from Browns 3D, Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the Browns. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little flag in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little flag in your day, put a little flag in your day.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Orange and Brown Report. Kyle Long talking about the Browns pass catchers.
For the Browns, my biggest question is, when it gets cold, is Deontay Johnson going to play? Because he opted not to go into the game when it was cold because he couldn't feel his fingers. We've all been there, man. I understand, but it doesn't get any warmer in Cleveland. David Njoku, superhero, looks like a Marvel character, kind of plays like it too. So whoever plays quarterback for that group, I mean, Jerry Jeudy showed last year that he had his renaissance, all right? And if Deontay Johnson can have a renaissance this year, that was the leading receiver in the AFC North a few years back. So don't forget.
Jeff, it's kind of interesting. And Deontay Johnson, it went so south last year. he's a guy that he's still reasonably young. I can't imagine he lost all his talent. The question is, can he keep his head on the way it needs to be to play in the NFL?
Well, there's two things. And again, the cold, it wasn't the cold thing. They didn't play him, and then they went to him with 2 minutes in the third quarter and asked him to go in for his first reps of the game. Was Deontay Johnson wrong? Absolutely. But I mean, a veteran player who has not played for the first 41, 42 minutes of the game probably assumes he's not playing that day. Because at some point, somehow, he would have been in the game by then, correct?
Yeah.
The thing with Deontay is, does Deontay himself feel like he's hit rock bottom? If Deontay feels like he hit rock bottom, and he told us all, the only team that was reaching out were the Cleveland Browns. So that's not necessarily, a knock, but I mean, this is a guy that was once a second-team all-pro wide receiver. Under 30 years old, still under 29 years old. Nobody was calling. So, and to his credit, he sounds like a guy who's been very open and honest about, hey, it was more me. Because, I mean, whether it was Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Houston, Baltimore again, there's one common denominator in all of there, and that is Deontay Johnson. But, again, I have high hopes that this could work. But also with players like Deontay Johnson, I've kind of labeled these guys like two players. These are guys that could be here for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. You don't necessarily know. You know what I'm saying? But, hey, this Browns wide receiver room, if Deontay Johnson can go out and perform, all of a sudden, this wide receiver room probably looks a heck of a lot better than people anticipated it would this year.
Yeah, without question. As an exercise here, let's take a look at some of the top free agents that are still out there. The pickings are getting a little slim. There's Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, pictured. Then you look at the offensive line, Brandon Sheriff. You got Zadarius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney. Both have been here. A couple of safeties, Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon. At this point, can you see Andrew Berry doing anything free agent-wise, or is it pretty much wait till roster cut-down day?
Well, I think some of those names, maybe they're not answering the call if the Cleveland Browns call. Zadarius Smith, probably looking for, a good opportunity where a team is already established that they'll be a January team. Justin Simmons really hasn't hidden from the fact that that's kind of what he was looking for, and he was looking for it last year. And look, Amari Cooper, for Cooper, how does that work? Basically the Browns chose Jerry Jeudy over him already. They have Deontay Johnson here, and, they saw the best of Cedric Tillman and obviously are hoping for that again at a, significantly younger age. What's there, if the Browns were a team that we felt maybe more, was ready to compete and probably contend for the playoffs last year, I think that list of guys probably looks a little bit different than the way we look at it right now. But, bringing in Zadarius Smith to take snaps away from Isaiah McGuire doesn't seem to make much sense. Amari Cooper, I think the Browns told us a year ago exactly how they felt about Amari Cooper and where he is, and obviously they weren't wrong. Keenan Allen, same type of scenario where, look, Chicago, after playing at, as long as he did in LA, going to Chicago just didn't really make any sense. But, and also with a lot of those guys, maybe the best opportunity for them is to hold out, another 4, 5, 6 weeks. And unfortunately, someone's injury becomes one of these guys on this list's treasure,
So one of the names of a quarterback who some think could end up rising to the top of next year's draft board is Drew Aller. Emery Hunt, on who Drew Aller reminds him of.
You mean Drew Bledsoe? We grew up, Ross, where, a guy like Aller would have been a clear-cut number 1 overall pick. But the game has changed a little bit where you got to be a little bit more athletic, and Aller can move around a little bit. But his throwing motion and his arm always reminds me of Drew Bledsoe, who I was a big fan of at Washington State, and also when he was first overall with the Patriots, instantly made those guys relevant. and led them to a Super Bowl in '97. So Drew Aller has skills. I think he's a pro quarterback. I know when you try to see the discussion on social media, it's always he's great or he stinks. But the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Like, yes, he has some inconsistencies that you want to see him work through.
You know, it's a local guy that I've seen on the field as a high school player a number of times, have stood there and watched him throw. He has a cannon for an arm.
Oh, no.
I kind of thought Penn State hasn't figured out how to use him. I will say he ran a 5 wide, and he's more athletic than a lot of people think.
I think with the thing with Alar, and this is probably going to be good for him because there was so much success last year with Tyler Warren. And look, it's not like the NFL, doesn't, have great value at the tight end position, but there wasn't much like wide receiver work that you saw from Alar, certainly from a successful standpoint. And, with a quarterback and, with a quarterback of the size of Drew Alar, what does everybody want to see? They want to see the howitzer. They want to see the 15 to 17 yard out pattern. They want to see you basically bury a 20-yard dig into the dead center of a wide receiver's chest. And that's something Alar's going to get probably the opportunity to do this year. Not like Penn State won't have another good tight end. They always do. But it's really hard to believe that whatever tight end comes in this year for Penn State is going to be, as good as the guy who went 14th overall in this past draft. Drew Alar definitely has talent. But there are going to be some other guys, and one of the ones I truly like, and he may be a guy that necessarily doesn't come out, but from South Carolina, Lenora Sellers, because, you're getting into this era where, a quarterback with, limited mobility to average mobility is kind of a dinosaur. These kids now are taken at 11 and 12 years old and, oh, hey, you're the best athlete we got. We're going to put you at quarterback. We'll teach you how to throw. We'll teach you how to read defenses. But guess what? If you don't have to, and you can just take the ball and create 10 yards, 20 yards, 60 yards, that's great too. But it's going to certainly, it should be a fun fall. Unlike last year, as far as just monitoring overall collegiate quarterback play as be relative to the draft. And certainly for the Browns, as long as they hold those 2 first-round selections, as much as everybody planted their flag one way or the other this year, it could certainly be interesting next year when maybe people are planting flags, but maybe it's 3 or 4 different flags on the quarterbacks that could be available in the 26th draft class.
Jeff Lloyd, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave. 14 days away, kids. We're getting there.
Sounds good. Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Pete Smith from the Orange and Brown Report up next on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Former Browns defensive back Hanford Dixon with what he sees with second-round pick Carson Schlesinger.
Thinking of this guy is a lot like JOK, meaning speed, because you guys know that's why we like JOK, because he can rush the quarterback, he can cover people coming out of the backfield, and he was just a phenomenal athlete. This kid, he is supposed to be pretty much like JOK. So it's going to be interesting to see how this defense and everything and see what happens.
Let's welcome in Pete Smith from the Orange and Brown Report. Pete, appreciate you joining us. Schlesinger, he's fast, but he's a bigger guy.
Yeah, I think ultimately, the Browns cross-train their linebackers in a way so they can put them anywhere. But ultimately, I think the Browns want to end up in a world where he's the long-term middle linebacker. And yes, he can play fast, and they want to use that. They want him to make plays behind the line of scrimmage. but particularly for Jim Schwartz, who wants to play that invert 2, Carson Schwarzenegger gives you a guy who can drop back to the middle of the field and cut off some of those passes that have been deep down the field, where in years past they've had guys like Sione Takitaki and some of these other guys who just aren't equipped. Schwarzenegger is far bigger. He takes up more space in that area of the field to be more competitive as a pass defensive option, in addition to the fact that he has range and speed and all these other things.
Were you? I was stunned that they went defense with the first 2 picks. Did that shock you? And part of it is the offense needs a lot.
I was surprised that they went with Schwarzenegger, less so with defense with the first pick. Personally, I would have loved to have gotten Abdul Carter on the Browns, but it doesn't surprise me that they went with more defensive line. But just with how the Browns operate, picking what I would describe as a non-premium position that early in the draft was a shocker. Clearly, the JOK thing makes an impact with that decision, and then just Jim Schwartz pounding the table for wanting more credibility in the middle of his defense is something that got the Browns going. And look, Schwarzenegger, 1-year starter, there are reasons to have concerns with what he's done to this point in his career. But in terms of production, the high-end athletic traits, and his overall intelligence, there's reason to believe he can be a stud in the middle of that defense.
Yeah, is that what do you think they were telling us as a front office when they took a defensive tackle and a linebacker? I mean, to me, it was like they thought they needed to get more tough up front in the middle.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way they approach the draft overall, you get to a point where you talk about sort of how we used to describe AFC North football. They not only take those 2 guys, they take a pair of running backs. They want to play a more physical brand of old school blue collar football. And given the fact they don't have a whole lot of offensive weaponry, they don't have a definitive answer at quarterback at this point. This is the way they have to play if they're going to be successful. In a lot of ways, if the Browns are going to have sort of a success this season, if they're going to be playing meaningful games in December, it's because they've stolen what has been the Pittsburgh Steelers' identity, and these guys certainly signal that type of approach.
So I know you wrote an article about the release of Obo Okonrankwo. Take us through that and kind of your thoughts through that article.
So most contracts are negotiated with a roster bonus or some type of bonus that gives the player and the team a very natural out. They usually end in March, where there's some sort of $1 million or a couple $1 million by this date, and it forces the team to sort of cut you or keep you, and then you're going to be part of the team. Okoronkwo's contract didn't have one of those, so he was sort of in limbo in terms of when they were going to sort of make a decision on him. But he's also due $6 million. They probably weren't going to want to pay that. They signed Joe Shoyinka, who they guaranteed $4.13 million. They've obviously got Myles Garrett. They're very excited about Isaiah McGuire on the other side. They've still got Alex Wright coming back. So all of a sudden, you've got guys who are going to be your 3rd, 4th, and 5th defensive ends, those edge players, that are potentially accounting for about $13 million. So they were never going to pay Okoronkwo that amount of money. So you ended up in this weird situation where the Browns sort of kept him around to minicamp through that to get to this sort of dead period. Maybe somebody was going to offer something in a trade. Ultimately, the market dictated that there wasn't anything there. And the Browns could have theoretically held Okoronkwo until August, down to cutdown day, and made a decision. But it just didn't make any sense. I think a lot of it is they wanted to do right by the player and give him a shot to go sign with another team before the start of training camp. I think that's why he was as grateful as he was when he left. And then the other part about this is the Browns need to get more reps from the McGuires, the Wrights, and the Tryon Shoyinkas, even the undrafted rookie who has some appeal in Aiden Huntington. They want to get as many reps for these guys as possible because they either need to find out that they can do it or that they may need to be back out in the market. And if Okoronkwo hasn't signed with anybody at that point, maybe they could revisit. Or they could theoretically go and look at somebody like Zadarius Smith, who's still out there in free agency. Either way, this sort of shores up the rotation, gives them fewer guys to have to work through. I mean, when they cut Okoronkwo, they've still got 12 defensive ends on the roster right now. So they have to start getting some of these guys out.
Yeah, and you mentioned them. Some of them you got to get answers on. McGuire looks pretty good. Can he do it consistently? Same thing with Wright before he got hurt. I'm curious. You also wrote an article about two of the undrafted free agents that the Browns have to get answers on: Mahmoud Diabate and Ronnie Hickman. Take us through that article and kind of your thoughts. How important this year is for both of them and for the Browns with them.
So the 2023 draft, to me, was sort of the best in terms of the overall process that the Browns employed. If you're talking about what do you want to get out of the draft, you want, perfect world, premium positions, supremely gifted athletes, productive players who are young. And the Browns, with the notable exception of Siaki Ika, who we can probably thank Jim Schwartz for picking, they did that across the board with all their picks. And then they sort of came up with this way of sort of signaling to guys who weren't drafted. They left these roles open at a couple of positions. That year, it was linebacker and safety. So they ended up signing a couple safeties out of Ohio State. They signed Ronnie Hickman and Tanner McAllister. And then they signed a couple linebackers. They signed a Diabate, who was sort of a hybrid edge inside linebacker. And then they signed a player named Charlie Thomas III out of Georgia Tech, who's super productive and athletic. They got through the competition. Hickman and Diabate managed to earn spots on that roster. And then combined with the draft class of 7 guys, they got these 2 extra players on it, which sort of extended the reach and made that draft look that much better. And now we are heading into the 3rd year with those guys still part of the roster. And now Ronnie Hickman is getting everything the Browns are doing with Ronnie Hickman is begging him to take a starting job next to Grant Delpit at that free safety spot. Jim Schwartz has come out and basically said it's his for the taking if he can do it. They signed DeMonte Casey. They signed Rayshon Jenkins, but those guys are more plug and play and emergencies if Hickman can't do the job. And then for Diabate, he's a really gifted athlete. He is a player that has played a whole lot of reps. I think he played 581 snaps on defense last year, just really inconsistent. But again, as part of the whole JOK injury thing, once you get past that and Carson Schwessinger, who's been on the team or who's going to be inked with the team for 4 years, basically everybody else on this team is on a 1-year deal. Jordan Hicks, 1-year deal. Devin Bush, a 1-year deal the Browns already probably regret. And then you have this space for a guy like Diabate who can potentially earn a spot as not only just a rotational guy, but there's a world where he could theoretically be a starter. So if Hickman can earn that starting job and acclimates himself well, we're going to be talking about contract extension for him. And if Diabate can at least, I think he's a safe bet to make the 53-man opening day roster. But if he can really acclimate himself well, there's a world where they're going to talk about retaining him. And in addition to a draft that looks reasonably promising with Cedric Tillman, DeJuan Jones, Isaiah McGuire, and all these guys they've added who are potentially going to start, they've got a guy in Ronnie Hickman who's potentially going to be starting free safety this year, and a guy in Diabate who's at the very least going to be a rotational option and special teams player, who then just extends the reach of that draft and sort of whatever you want to say about Andrew Berry. I think he's been largely average at the draft free agency, and that this is one of those areas where he sort of helped himself and sort of improved his effort on the margins.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about. Obviously, finding a quarterback is priority 1, 2, and 3. But I would argue after a quarterback, maybe left tackle is the area they have to figure out. And I know you wrote an article about DeJuan Jones. How big of a plus would it be if they figure out, hey, the DeJuan Jones we saw a couple years ago is the guy that we thought he was when we thought we had a steal in the 4th round?
I mean, it would be enormous for a number of reasons. Look, the left tackle is valuable. It's not quite as valuable as it used to be. But the reason it's so important is the Browns have no answers anywhere else on the line after this year. Joel Bitonio, I mean, he's talking now about maybe this isn't his last year. Ethan Posick, Wyatt Teller, and Jack Conklin are all in the last year of their deals. So if DeJuan Jones can lock down that job, they've at least got one guy. You can sit there and go, okay, we've got this one player. They got him in the 4th round, and all of a sudden he could be a fixture. And now you're going to have to talk about contract extension, which is a great problem for them to have. But ultimately, if they don't, then suddenly they've got two first-round picks, and everybody's looking at quarterback, understandably. But you're going to be in what at least from here looks to be a very, very talented tackle class. And even if DeJuan Jones is great, you're probably going to need at least one. But if he can't do it, they may be in a world where they need 2 guys out in free agency, draft, all that stuff next year to sort of fill the hole in addition to whatever they're going to do with guard. Maybe Zach Zinter can step and be one of those guys. Maybe Tevin Jenkins can prove he can stay healthy and they want to keep it one of those guys. But one of the big curiosities that everybody has who's looking at the Browns from sort of a national perspective is they sit there and go, nobody's under contract on this team on the offensive line, so they don't know where it's going to go after this year.
Pete Smith from the Orange and Brown Report now going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll continue talking offense for the Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day, put a little play in your day.
We continue talking Browns with Pete Smith from the Orange and Brown Report. E.J. Manuel, former NFL quarterback, on what he sees with the Browns quarterback situation.
From a player's perspective, and usually in a quarterback room, you have roles, right? You have your older veteran like a Joe Flacco. You have your starter. We don't know who that's going to be. I don't think Coach Stefanski knows who that's going to be. And then you'll have your young guys. Now, obviously, you have 2 young guys in Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. So I'm assuming one of them is maybe trade capital at some point. And then you still have Deshaun Watson, who's returning at some point as well. I don't know if it's this season or the following season, rehabbing, but I've heard he's a coach in the room right now. To me, this just looks like another issue for the Browns. And if you're trying to compete in this division where you have Joe Burrow, you have Lamar Jackson, obviously Aaron Rodgers with the Pittsburgh Steelers, you need to know who your quarterback is at this point. Like, you can't go into training camp saying, all right, well, we're just going to roll the ball out there and figure out who the best guy is based off of preseason. You need to have a pecking order. This team needs to know who the leader is. And at this point in the offseason, I'm just not really liking where the Browns are because of the quarterback conundrum. Again, maybe they try to use the young guys as draft capital, but I don't know. And look, 2026 draft, you know, Jeremy's right. A bunch of potential first-round picks, maybe even 4 or 5 guys who could be first-rounders. I just don't understand why you draft 2 quarterbacks in this draft.
Pete, when you look at it, yeah, you want to know who your quarterback is, but you got to find whomever gives you a reasonably decent chance to win. And I think that's why that's where they're at. That show us what you can do once the pads come on with all 4 of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to look at this is who's going to help you win games, because that's where a head coach is always going to be looking, and that makes the most sense. But create an environment that allows you took what amount to be 3 swings at this between Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, all competing against sort of the mystery box that is next year. From a process standpoint, I like that as an approach because you don't have a quarterback. So until you do, you should take every possible bite at the apple to see if you can find one. And if it doesn't work, okay, fine, go get a quarterback in next year's draft. But as long as the Browns take the approach that they're going to put these guys in position to succeed, and if one of them can take that and run with it and be, an impact player, great. Then the Browns find their option. But if not, then you've just got to find the guy who's going to help you win. That would lead you to Joe Flacco naturally. But yes, there is a disadvantage. You look at the Bengals and you look at the Ravens. There's no question who their quarterback is, and they're already among the best in the league, and the Browns are at a small disadvantage in that. But given that the Browns are at a disadvantage of that, they might as well lean into it and use it to the best of their ability to see if they can find something that's going to work for them. Because if one of these guys, if Pickett or Gabriel or Shador can be an answer, something that can extend beyond this year and be a real quarterback, then all of a sudden the Browns have 2 first-round picks next year, second, third, all the rest, and they can build around those players. So the incentives are there for them to see what these kids can do and really lean into it. My personal opinion, I hope Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco never see a preseason rep and just let those 2 young guys go at it. And most of the work is going to come in the joint practices anyway, and see what's going to give you the best chance to win football games.
Yeah, and you know what? If you look back to last year, and this is never going to come out, no one's going to ever admit this, they were going to play Deshaun Watson until he couldn't play. And I think that's one of the reasons they have arrived at, we're going to play whoever gives us the best chance to win. My guess is when Kevin Stefanski told Myles Garrett the plan, it was, we're going to play the best quarterback that we see day in and day out in practice and in preseason.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, so much of this comes down to, because of what you laid out with the Deshaun Watson aspect last year, I don't think that Kevin Stefanski necessarily risks losing the locker room. But if he were to handle the quarterback room in a way that they did last year, then he could. And for all the stuff about how Kevin Stefanski's safe and he's not on the hot seat, and ownership may be perfectly content to feel that way, if he sort of messes around with the quarterback room in a way that gives those players reason to think they're not seriously trying to win football games, they're not serious about how they're approaching the season, I don't think ownership's going to have a choice. I think he would lose the locker room at that point. So he has to do everything in his power to approach this in the most honest way, the guy who's going to give him the best chance to win, the guy who clearly has the team behind him, as opposed to, the guy who's supposed to be the starter, which is what they ran into last year.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I know you wrote an article about, for the Browns offense, control the controllables. Take us through kind of that thought process.
So, look, the Browns were bad enough on their own last year, but pre-snap penalties, the operation of getting the play call into the offense was too slow. There were too many times they were racing the clock to get the play off. So they couldn't do things like use motion or shift or do these other things. So you're already at a disadvantage with the quarterback position, and now you're making it worse because he can't see what the defense is doing. He can't put the team in a play that's going to put him in a better chance to succeed. They can't use motion to maybe help them identify what the defense is doing. And, at one point last year, Kevin Stefanski basically handed the thing over to Ken Dorsey and said, look, I'm going to get out of your way to hopefully make this thing go faster. They got a small bump, but it didn't last. And now Kevin Stefanski sort of taking back control. And I think a lot of this is just becoming more efficient with that. If they can get the play call in quicker, like they have in years past, that's going to get the quarterback, whoever it is, to the line faster. They can see what the defense is doing. They can use motion. It's not going to feel like such a rush. Guys are going to feel more confident about what they see. And then the other element is, because the Browns were such a mess in terms of the offensive tackle situation, it limits what you can do with motion. Like everybody says, oh, use motion, use motion, use motion. It's going to make your life easier. That's fine until it changes the picture for the offensive line, and suddenly you've got guys coming from different angles, and they aren't prepared for it, and suddenly a quarterback or a running back is getting ear-holed because the picture has changed, and they haven't had the time or the preparation to be ready to go. If with the Browns now, hopefully 7 deep on the offensive line, bringing in Cornelius Lucas, bringing Tevin Jenkins, being healthier than they were last year, this should hopefully allow them to be more confident in being able to change the picture, utilizing things like motion and shifts and stuff that you can think back to, when they were at their best, stuff that they put the defense at a disadvantage consistently on, get back to those things, make it easier for the quarterback. You're not going to have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, short of a Jaden Daniels type phenomenon coming out of this thing. So you've got to give them every advantage you can. And those are the things that they can take and control. And then the other thing that Kevin Stefanski's been talking about is obviously turnovers. If the Browns avoid the pre-snap penalties, if the Browns can avoid making the mistakes and putting themselves in 3rd and long, then they're going to have fewer opportunities to, give the defense an edge in terms of knowing what's coming, being able to make plays on the ball, those type of things. More punts or field goals or, perfect world, let's get some extra points. But you're not turning the ball over and putting your defense in a huge disadvantage and just killing yourself that way.
Before I let you go, thoughts on a couple of rookies, Dylan Sampson, Harold Fannin. Those are guys, you don't hear a lot about them. What are your thoughts about how they fit into what the Browns want to do offensively?
Yeah, the Browns didn't draft a wide receiver. Obviously, a lot of people were sort of critical of that and thinking, oh, they should do it, especially when, a lot of people were thinking they were going to take Travis Hunter second overall. Harold Fannin's going to get every opportunity to be a major contributor on this offense. He's young. He's 20 years old. So that may be difficult. But if he can present that Isaiah Likely type factor that the Ravens have been utilizing, that other teams have been able to utilize, they're going to let him do it as much as possible, get bigger bodies. The Browns want to run the football anyway, and then be able to use things like play action. If Harold Fannin can sort of use the most dominant, productive tight end in the country at Bowling Green, if he can give you any of that. I mean, Isaiah Likely is a great example because, Isaiah Likely is a player who's done a lot for the Ravens, but his best year is 450 yards. We're not talking about a guy who has 1,300 yards receiving or anything like that, but just that factor gives the offense a lot and puts a lot of pressure on the defense. Not a whole lot of teams have two guys that can cover 240-pound guys that can run. The Browns want to create that dynamic. Dylan Sampson, look, they did not draft him just to be Quinton Junkin's backup. They're going to use him in other ways. I think they're going to use him. They may split him out as a receiver. They may use him as a jet player, a guy who's in motion a lot. They may manufacture some touches. At Tennessee, Dylan Sampson, again, at 20 years old, was a focal point in an SEC offense, and he was carrying that team. If the Browns can put him out in space, and as opposed to having to beat 11 guys, he can beat 2 or 3 or 1 if you can set it up right, and he can take off. He's got the speed to pay that off. And rather than being the number 1 guy on an SEC offense, he can be your 4th or 5th option and potentially create some matchup problems for teams in the NFL. And given, the Browns have a lot of questions at wide receiver, Harold Fannin and Dylan Sampson are ways that they could potentially sort of find ways to problem solve until they get the proven playmakers at that position they really want.
Pete Smith, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Pete.
Thanks for having me.
Pete Smith, make sure you check him out. Great stuff. Orange and Brown reports. Really, really insightful Browns coverage. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.